Spiritual Life Center, transforming lives as we love, serve, and remember who we are. One heart, one mind, one soul at a time.
Good evening. Welcome to another Wow Unplugged with Celia, Coughlin-Surridge, and me. I'm Reverend Deborahs Phillips, and we have an interesting topic tonight. And let me see if I can. Was it God or was it Facebook's algorithm? Is that the title?
Is it God or Facebook's algorithm? Yes, that is correct.
Okay, and exactly what is that? What's the question?
Yes. Okay. So if you are familiar with my story, I came to Spiritual Life Center through a license plate holder, which I think is an episode from a couple of months back. So if you missed it, check it out. For me, it was very clear that God was speaking to me in that moment. So my grandfather had just passed away. I was experiencing grief in its adult form for the first time in my life, and looked up at a stoplight, saw a license plate that said "One God, Many Paths." Got really excited. Went to our website. Then I saw Christine Boughton's last service. It literally had just happened, and it was "When God Calls, Answer." And I remember being very struck by that message. There were lots of things about it that I was just like, wow, this is a direct indication from God himself that I'm obviously on the right track, that this is where I need to go. This is how I'm going to seek healing, yada, yada, right? So now we live in this very peculiar world where everything that's in front of us is very obviously, well, okay, I work for a marketing firm. I own a marketing firm. So marketing is what I'm thinking of. And so that's the thing, is that everything that I see, I feel is artfully placed in some type of marketing funnel. And if you're not familiar with a funnel is basically the customer journey of the entry, which is getting to know you, all the way down to the purchaser or someone who buys into whatever you're selling, right? So what basically happened was a couple of weeks ago, well, it was right after quarantine hit, another community that I am familiar with kept popping up in my Facebook feed. And I started tuning in on Sundays. So I'd watch SLC in the morning, and then they'd be on right afterwards, and I'd pop on over there and, start listening to them. And then it just dawned on me. I was like, okay, so is God telling me that maybe it's time for me to strengthen my relationship with Jesus and start listening to this group that's their focus, is the life of Christ? Is that what I'm supposed to do right now? Or was this a very artfully put together sponsored ad from Facebook? Or the algorithm, was Facebook like, hey, she's kind of into this, so we're going to push this in front of her? So my thing is that that's all man created, right? If we're really going to break this down, I feel like that's all very man created. A person sat down in front of a computer, either paid money to push their ad out, or made sure that their Facebook page did certain things to reach people like me. Is that actually God talking to me, or is it just Facebook's algorithm? So that's my question, is what is a message from God and what is just marketing?
Did you listen to my talk yesterday?
Well, technically that would be 3 days ago. No, wait, a week ago.
Oh,
anyway, yeah, because this is the future.
Okay, let's back up here. Did you listen to my talk a couple of Sundays ago?
I did. Yes, no, and wait.
Okay, so this is it turns out I had no idea where you were going to go with this. And that's a beautiful question, because the truth is that Facebook can be out there doing their algorithm, and you marketing people can be putting all your stuff out there to draw us all in. But at the same time, everything that comes our way is what we attract to ourselves through our own consciousness. So your consciousness is, one of being open to deeper spirituality. You're open to exploring different ways, perhaps getting back into a more Christian oriented type teaching or whatever it is that you're doing, and that's in your consciousness. And so you, on some level, are attracting that, and Facebook is just accommodating. They're working for God, right?
That is a very good way of putting it. See, the other thought that I had was that I almost felt like it was my grandmother who was, she was very, she wanted me to accept Jesus into my heart when I was like 8, and do the
Yeah.
whole gambit. And so I almost kind of felt like she was like, hey, these guys are cool. Like, check them out. But I still diverted back to the fact that, is this just Facebook's algorithm? Like, I guess, it's one of those things where marketing budgets are huge within bigger churches because they know that in order to put their message out there, they have to spend money to pay for the advertising. So this is actually, I think you're familiar with it. This is almost kind of a Baha'i way of thinking about it almost. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Baha'i, if I understand correctly, they're a group of people who believe that no matter what religion you're from, that message was specifically put here so it was your way to God, that everything is just the way that God meant to speak to you. Is that right?
Well, I mean, our consciousness, it is our consciousness that attracts whatever it is into our lives. It is our consciousness. Our consciousness is our filter. Let's look at it that way. I mean, and in that, the talk that I did, the yes, no, and wait talk, I was talking about, there's a quote in there that says that if something is not in your consciousness until you bring it into your consciousness. And the example was, you drive down the road and you look over to the side and you see a building you've never seen before.
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden, it's there, but it was excluded from your view. And then when you see it, it's like, oh, and you can't not see it ever again, right? And we have the whole joke about, well, you can't unsee that.
Right. Yeah.
But
Once it's there.
once something comes into your awareness, your conscious awareness, then it's there. But there's all kinds of things that we're aware of that are in our subconscious that we're not, openly aware of, so to speak. And so I look at it as it's just the cream is rising to the top. And, there could be a time when all of those ads from this other group you would just gone by it and go, whatever. There could have been a day when you could have been at that stoplight and you would have sort of seen that license plate frame, or you might not have even noticed it at all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or I've had experiences where I've gone in and I've known something was there, I've and then one day I go, oh man, that's really cool. I never really thought about it before.
Right.
And so part of it is us being open and ready.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is all incremental. I mean, yeah, these wonderful flashes of intuition, these, Saul being thrown to the ground, and having that experience. And by the way, I always, for years and years and years, always thought he'd been thrown off of a camel. I don't know where I got that, but I always had this picture of he's riding along and he gets thrown off onto the ground. And I finally looked it up, and he was just walking. It's much better getting thrown off of, his mount. But anyway, and that does happen, obviously. But most of the time, it's bits and pieces here and there. It's a license plate frame. It's seeing something in your environment that's like always been there.
Right.
And so there's probably all kinds of ads on Facebook and Instagram and, whatever else there's out there. And sometimes it'll come into your awareness and sometimes it won't.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like there's an external God trying to go, yo. It's more your inner self going, okay, let's do it now. Does that make any sense?
Yes, it does, which actually brings me to my next question, which is that, so you become aware of this thing that may or may not you've been aware of in the past. And your first reaction is a couple of different things, right? So there's the awareness factor, but that can go into the awareness factor and I want to learn more, or the awareness factor and maybe fear. I'm not interested. Like it like basically putting up a blockage for yourself to not then go down that rabbit hole, if you will. So when we're looking at these things and we're, faced with so many messages, in your personal opinion, what is the next step? Like if I'm genuinely interested, so my normal default is, hey, that's cool. I want to find out everything. Let's do it all now. Right. I'm a little bit of an overachiever like that.
I haven't
But
noticed.
oh, thanks, Deborah. But like, okay, so I'm trying to protect myself right now because we live in a world where we're getting a ton, right? And then anything can obviously happen any day of the week.
Yeah.
So, where do we go from here? Like, how do we discern for ourselves what our subconscious is telling us or our consciousness is telling us is really important to follow? How do I tell?
First of all, chill.
Yay. Okay. I will work on that.
No, I mean, this whole thing about letting go and not trying too hard, we can talk about that all we want, but we're all achievers and we all want answers and we all want them now, especially now when we have no idea on so many levels. We've got so many changes going on. But when I have so many things coming at me at one time, I try to stop and just look at what all of these different things are and see how they all feel. And another way to do it is to simply not engage in any of them and see which one floats to the top. Because if you try to walk away from something and it's after you, it'll stick. So you might have 5 things sitting there and you just sort of kind of ignore them or dip in them a little bit. Usually 1 or 2 of them will become important to you somehow or another.
So, okay, to that though, I have another question, devil's advocate question. Are you familiar with Elizabeth Gilbert and Big Magic?
No, I've read some of her other books. I haven't read that one.
Okay, so Big Magic is kind of that universal idea. You put it out into the universe. Ideas are out there. Any person can be creative. That type of a book, right?
Right. Okay.
So
I'm familiar with that.
Yes, right. Like that's everything we're talking about.
Right.
So in that particular book, she mentions that ideas come to us, right? Like if we're open and receptive, ideas will come to us naturally. However, if you do not nurture that idea or act on it, then it will eventually go away and fly to somebody else. And she actually has an example of an idea that never came to fruition. And then she ended up meeting somebody, or like she had a friend who then was like, I had this idea, and they were like the exact same book, and it freaked her out. So let's say that this rabbit hole of Jesus Christ and me needing to spend some time getting to know him, which I believe he's already somewhere with me. Like you accept him once, right? He doesn't just go away.
Right.
But that's a personal opinion. But anyway, so this idea, it goes away. But what if, so this is when we get into that, like, I'm overthinking things, and I'll admit that, but like, what if I don't nurture this? This was something that I was supposed to do, and then it goes away, and that's detrimental. Like, at what point do we, like, this is where meditation probably comes in, and I just need to calm down and actually like listen, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah, because the rules are not that strict. I mean, we always have free will. We always have choices. And just because an idea comes your way does not mean it's yours. Think about, the camera was invented in about 3 different places in the world, all at the same time. The telephone was invented in more than one place at the same time. There was somebody working on it in Europe. There was somebody working on it here. You can go back and you can look at some of these major inventions, these major ideas that have come into the world, and they come into the world in different places. And some people act on it and some people don't.
Hmm.
And so just because an idea comes your way doesn't mean that you're responsible for it. You're responsible for working from the inside out, because these ideas are not coming from outside you. They're coming, and you're in tune with the cosmic flow, so to speak. And so you do what you do best, and you do what you are equipped to do. I mean, I've had a lot of ideas in my life, and a lot of them, there's no way I could have ever accomplished them. They weren't my thing. But, oh, that's a cool idea. Okay, somebody else go figure it out. But nothing's wasted, nothing's lost. And those kinds of books always alarm me just slightly, because these statements of, like, if you don't do this, it's going to go away and it'll be lost. And no idea is ever lost. Someone will find it, someone will work with it. And then the things that are right for you, and the things that you can do with joy and love from your heart, those are your things. I managed a bookstore for a while for another church, and it was extremely stressful, and I wanted to quit. And one of the people I worked with, one of the priests, kept telling me, you can do this, you can do this. And when I finally resigned, I was ill for quite some time afterwards.
Mm.
And she came to me and she said, I finally realized that just because you can do something, it does not mean that you should.
Yes, that is 100%
or that you have
true.
to.
Yeah.
I mean, and just think about how much we're bombarded with ideas and concepts and everything now. If we tried to act on them, every single one that came our way, we'd all be basket cases.
That's very true. That's, it's so interesting that you mentioned that, because that's what I was thinking about earlier, was that I constantly percolate ideas. I have thoughts on things, and I've really struggled, especially in my 20s, that of the mentality of, I want to do it all. I want to do everything. And I also feel that part of that fear and that me wanting to do everything was also subconsciously a fear that I may possibly meet the same fate that my father did, which was dying very young, and thinking, if I don't do it now, it's never going to happen. And I'm, slowly learning that, first of all, there's just not everything that I do very well. There are things that I do well. There are things that I don't. That's all the case.
Right.
But also that, if it's meant to happen, that it will happen. That is a very hard concept for me to deal with, because I am very much a control freak, and I am very terrified that I deal with that terror every day of my life. And it comes out in the form of high functioning anxiety. I didn't realize that I had that until a couple of years ago. But it's because I'm terrified that I'm going to die and I'm going to leave my family behind at a very young age. And so I feel like I have to achieve everything now, but that's not a healthy balance. And so I struggle with that.
And we should probably have a conversation about that kind of thing one of these days, because you came here with your own mission. You are not required to follow the mission that your father, you have your own life, you have your own path, you have your own thing that you're doing. And so I went through a thing when I was turning 45, and I knew that I was perfectly healthy, but my father died when he was 45. And so I spent a year being a little concerned about that. Although really inside I knew that I was meant to be here longer. And then the same thing happened. Well, actually it's happening now. My mother and my sister both died. One died just after she turned 71, and the other one died just before she turned 72. And I figure I've got 5 months left.
No, you do not. You're going to live forever, Deborah. You are going to live as long as I do, which is a very long ass time, right? Long butt time. Oh my gosh.
But that gets into your head. And I mean, they were both at my age right now. Both of those women were very, very ill, and we knew that they weren't going to survive. I mean, so, but it's the idea. And here we come back. We got off there, but we come back to the ideas that are floating around. And Elvis Presley was absolutely convinced that he was going to die at the same age his mother did. And guess what? Because he believed it so strongly, that who's to say he didn't sort of kind of unconsciously make that happen.
that was going to literally be my next question, which is that there has been a lot of conversation within the community about, what you focus on is what you manifest.
Right.
And so I am concerned that my concern is actually me manifesting it into being true. And I don't want that at all. So my question to you is, I'm actively making steps to try to live longer. We're, talking the whole, medical gambit, anything that I can possibly do, acupuncture, everything. Right. And so I feel like if I'm actively making those steps to lengthen my life, I haven't resigned myself to dying at 53.
Yeah.
So I should be okay, right? Like I haven't accidentally set myself up for destruction. Like,
No, you haven't.
Tell me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, and you can get into all kinds of philosophies about when people die, it's when they're done. I mean, it may seem like they're young, but they're done. And their spirit, their soul has completed whatever they came here to do, and they're going off to do something else. And so, I mean, both of my
I
parents.
have to interject there though. Like I this is where we get kind of in the deep into my own like anger over
Yeah.
the fact that my dad died 15 years ago. Like,
Yeah.
I don't feel that he was done, like how can I say that about my father who left behind a 16-year-old child and a 19-year-old child and then his wife who was 42, like how could you be done at 53?
His soul, I mean, God doesn't make mistakes. People don't, I mean, we may have to cut this part out and
I'm sorry. I was like, Deborah, I have some conversations about that need to happen.
Yeah, no, we need to talk about this, but on a soul level, your father had done what he needed to do here. And my father dying when I was 21 was really hard, and it was probably the greatest gift he gave me. Because if he had stayed around, I would have felt obligated to stay in a little teeny tiny town and get married and have kids and do all this crap that I was not meant to do, not built to do. And so it set me off. It completely changed the trajectory of my life, completely. So, and I get it. It's, I mean, I'm certainly not minimizing the trauma, because it's hard to have your parents. Both of my parents were gone by the time I was 34. I haven't had parents for, I've had parents, I've had not had parents for longer than I did have parents. And in my case, I was set free to do what I needed to do. And so, it's a case thing. It's very different for every single person. And also being able to grieve properly has a lot to do with how one adjusts to that thing that happened.
That is definitely something that I don't feel like, you work on, but, in my particular circumstance, I don't like, that's why when I dealt with my grandfather, that was the first time that I feel like I grieved, like in the adult sense, because that did not happen when I was 19, obviously.
Yeah. Well, and then, I mean, I didn't either with my dad. My mother was such a mess. I was taking care of her. So it was a long time before I worked through. I mean, I was a mess in my 20s. Even though I hit unity when I was 25. That was the turning point for me to learn to take responsibility for my own life. But easy? No. I mean, I was a complete mess for a lot of years. So, wow.
Talk about a Facebook algorithm, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's all this talk about us coming in with contracts. And I personally believe that we each come in here with an idea of why we're here and what we're going to do here. I also believe that we have lots of different choices. And we can choose not to uphold a lot of those little contracts. I don't like the word contract because it makes it sound so binding. But I do think that we come into, you and I probably had some sort of agreement that we would hook up when we got here and try to work together. There's obviously a connection.
Right.
This
Yeah.
isn't our first meeting. And so, but we all come in here to do something. And when we're done doing that thing, we don't stay.
Yeah.
And it's really hard for young people when they lose their parents. My father had been sick for years. In fact, he'd been so sick so long, I stopped believing that he would die. So when he actually did die, I was very shocked.
Mm.
Because I was told for 10 years, your father could die at any moment. And for 10 years, at any moment, he didn't die until he did. So it wasn't a shock in terms of I wasn't expecting it. I just didn't believe it could happen anymore.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's the thing, is that I feel that the experience that you go through when someone passes on is very different when it is very sudden versus something that is you have some time to process it and say your goodbyes before that person actually a person or cat. Like, I'm not gonna lie, like, the year that we found out that we were gonna have George, we had to say goodbye to our little kitty Lucifer, who when he passed was probably only maybe like 6, like maybe 7, and that's pushing it. And he was feral when we found him. And I've had very strong connections with all of our animals. I feel that to a degree that they're somehow kind of like a soulmate-y type of thing, the ones that come into our lives.
Yeah.
And Lucifer was that. Like, it was like I had experienced him in a previous life or something, because he came in. We called him Lucifer because he actually bit me. And by the time he passed away, he was a cat who was literally sleeping between Adam and I every night, and it was almost like a child to us. And so when he passed away from cancer, like, that was so hard because of the connection that we had with him, not because he was a cat or our cat. Like, there was something about his personality, and there's no explanation to me other than there must have been some other type of connection somewhere in the universe for him to have found us and then allowed us to basically tame him to be a house cat when he was so feral when we found him, So, and then for him to pass away, it was just incredibly difficult. But I don't know, then a couple of months later, we discover that we're having George, and I'll leave that one out for your own interpretation.
Well, I mean, but it's all about connection. I mean, everything that we're talking about, and we've gotten very deep and very serious here.
Yeah.
It's all about connection. It's how we're connected. And, you might get your message from Facebook. You might get your message from a cereal box. You might get your message from a deep spiritual conversation. You might get it from just sitting in a room by yourself. I mean, it's the medium through which our ideas and our answers come are really sort of irrelevant. It's that we're open to them and allow them to become part of us, and then those that we think that we're able to act upon. There's some that we can act upon, some we cannot act upon. Or don't want to act upon. Well, that's a really good idea, but Fred down the street should be doing that, not me. That ain't my thing, but thanks for letting me see it. And I'm just going to swipe to the left and go to the next screen.
Yeah. So that's really what I'm hearing right now, is that it's kind of everything that we're being told anyway, if you're kind of paying attention to the political climate out there.
Yeah.
But it's that in order to do or make a decision on anything, you need to stop, do your research, and sit with it and make your own personal decisions before moving forward. It's being
Right.
educated. And it sounds like this is the same thing. Is it God or Facebook? Educate yourself first.
Well, and just be in touch with what it feels like for you. I mean, I am sure that things have come down the road in the past and you've thought, yeah, I could do that. And then the idea of doing it may just like sick to your stomach.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's not for you to do.
Right.
Or if it's going to take so much out of you to do it, even though you're really good at it. I watch you learning. I'm watching you learn how to balance having your own business, a business that kind of doesn't have a lot of boundaries anyway, because marketing is a little bit like the Wild West. And at the same time, you have to have boundaries for your own personal sanity and the fact that you have a child and a husband and a life. Yeah, and
I didn't know I had a life. Where can I find that?
Well, you're trying to have one, so this is your sandbox right now.
Yeah.
And you get to, and you get to play with that, and you get to shuffle the sand around and find out what's there and build some little castles and see what happens.
That's what I keep telling myself, especially when the nights are bad, when I'm having my anxiety, is that, I just have no idea what's to come. And whatever does come, it's, going to be even better than what I'm experiencing right now. And life is pretty good in comparison to some other people.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, do we have any words to wrap this one up with?
I still go back to my question about the dinosaurs with Adam and Eve. Like, if you watched our last Unplugged, we'll get to that eventually, I'm sure. I love the idea of, ending with an obscure question. And that one just has stayed with me for years. Like, that's an absurd question. But anyway.
Cartoonists have it wrong. and so to the people who make movies. There were no human beings around when the dinosaurs were here. At least to our knowledge.
To our knowledge. That's the thing.
To our knowledge. All right. Well, thank you for listening and watching us. And you'll see us again very soon. We don't even know what our next topic is, but that's what makes it fun.
It is. I love it. Thanks.
Blessings,
Deborah.
and may the joys of the world go with you. Good night.
Spiritual Life Center. Transforming lives as we love, serve, and remember who we are. One heart.